It's 8:30 p.m.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Stalker, Chairman of the Board of the Library. Welcome to our May board meeting. We have a quorum present in Jackson, our Grace Robertson, Dale Barber, Sean Koplarens, and I believe Nina Lenz will be joining us by Zoom. I'm joining by Zoom. We have Kip Roberson and Stella Terrazas in the room. And do we have anybody else staff in the room right now?
Maggie and
Okay.
and Diane.
Super.
Nina is on.
I would move to approve the May agenda. Do I have a second?
Second. I have a question.
Okay.
What happened to the consent? Why did library financial information?
We've had, we talked.
Are we not?
We talked. Go ahead.
Go ahead. It's your agenda.
Grace, at the last board meeting, we said until the financials get into a regular routine in terms of the date and time for last month or the month prior, we were going to pull it from the consent agenda since we're being talked about at every meeting for the last 3 meetings. So if we get a normalized reporting for our it's going to be a discussion at every meeting until everyone feels that we're back to a more standard presentation of the financials. It's really been a matter of scrambling to transition from what we have done and controlled ourselves in the past and done very well to adapting to the new county system, which has put some time pressure on staff as well as some of our outside providers. So we just thought it was easier since we've been talking about financials separately anyway for the last 2 months. Is that okay?
Okay, so we're not going to approve them, consent to the financials when we get to that
No, we're going to do it separately.
individually? Oh,
We're going to do the financials separate from the rest of the consent agenda.
okay. I'll get it.
I had a second to my motion. Do I have any other questions before I ask for approval? May I, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next order of business is the minutes from the April 21st, 2022 regular board meeting. I was only in attendance for half of that meeting, so I would take a motion to approve them from somebody who was at the full meeting.
I make a motion to approve the April 21st board meeting minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions, comments, changes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Public comment. If anybody who is watching this meeting on Zoom or a guest present in the room would like to make a comment, would you please unmute yourself? Wave your hand on Zoom and then unmute yourself. Kip, do we have anybody?
Doesn't look like it.
Going once? Twice? Terrific. Correspondence. I'm sorry?
We do have correspondence this month.
Yeah. We have a request from the Library Foundation to serve alcohol at an event later on this year. We are the only department in the county that allows alcohol to be served, I believe, twice a year. Is that correct? Up to 2 times a year. Is that correct, Kip?
Yes.
And
I would add that the 2 times a year is in the county facilities policy. I would add that prior to it being added to the county's policy, that the library's policy was also 2 events per year, and they were reserved exclusively for the foundation. So if we wanted to follow that past practice, both of these under the county facility would still be reserved for the foundation.
And I guess I had one just question. I think this is fine, but I had one question whether we have anything in, since we are an exception to the rule for the rest of the county. It's just a question always of liability on our insurance or on the foundation's insurance, and whether if there is something that is a problem, if we, the library, are covered.
In my understanding, from what I've had a similar discussion with Sarah Mann recently. The library is covered under the county's policy. And I would say that there are 2 other facilities in the county that allow alcohol. One, I believe, is the old Wilson Schoolhouse, and that has unlimited use. And then there's one other facility that has, I believe, 1 use per year. So we're not quite unique in that way, but.
Thank you.
And just to the foundation insurance, we have named a number of events on our policy, including things like this. So we name the benefit, we name our page the podium reception, we name library events of a small nature with alcohol and whatever. So it's covered under ours as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Maggie. That's very helpful. So I will move to approve the Teton County Library Foundation request to serve alcohol in accordance with Teton County Facilities Policy at the Foundation's Summer Book Swap to be held on Sunday, June 26, 2022 from 5:30 to 7 at the Teton County Library in Jackson. Do I have a second to that motion?
I would second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to the library financial information and the staff report, please. Sorry, the budget request update, excuse me.
Oh, we're not, oh, yes, the FY23 budget request, as I believe we discussed last month, was presented to the commissioners. At that time, it was not yet approved. I have been to 2 follow-up meetings concerning the FTE request for the part-time facilities maintenance technician. And after some back and forth discussions between us, general services and facilities for the county has approved our request for that half-time position. Beyond that, the commissioners have been discussing compensation for staff that seems to be in the range of 2.5% all the way up to 10%. Their discussion of finalizing that will be on Monday of next week. And then there have been questions about a budget shortfall for FY23. At this moment, they've only been discussing how to shift funds around and how to cover that deficit. There have not been specific requests of departments as of yet by the commissioners to look at cutting the budget request at all. So Peter and I have met and discussed some options that might be available to us. But at this moment, those have not been acted on. So,
And you provided a letter to the county on some areas what we might be able, where we see flexibility. Is that correct?
I know the county clerk did ask for some information from the directors. that was sent, but that's not been presented or discussed
Right.
beyond being sent to Mo. So I don't think we need to discuss that yet.
Right.
So that's where we are. They should be getting close to finalizing the budget requests for next year.
Any questions for Kip on the budget request?
Thank you.
Sure.
That's always a huge job,
Well,
so.
it
Time
actually
consuming.
leads directly into the financial narrative that was presented. The motor vehicle revenues looks like we're not going to get for this year, and there wasn't an explanation of whys and where tos and wherefores and so forth. Could you address that, please?
Yes, so we were told, I guess in the fall, when I queried about when we were gonna receive some property tax revenue and motor vehicle, that the motor vehicle funding would not happen and that we were just gonna get the straight property tax request. I can check into that again just for a final verification, but I was looking at some emails yesterday and it did seem, from looking at an email from the fall with Kitty Smits, the treasurer, that that was indeed the fact, that we were just receiving the property tax revenue. And I think it was somehow wrapped into the decision for us not to receive our own mills, but I'm not 100% sure that that's part of the reason.
Well, Stella, my confusion is, and I'm sorry for it. I should know the answer, but I don't. There is an overall revenue that is part of our budget request, and that is funded and approved by the Board of County Commissioners. What's unclear is, are we going to have a revenue shortfall of $230,000+ because we're not receiving that, or are they shifting it to just property tax and we're getting that equivalent amount of money from just the property tax source?
I am going to clarify that. From what it looked like, it seemed like, yes, this is just going to be a revenue shortfall. But I will clarify that for sure with both the Mo and Katie, because it was a little bit confusing in terms of the information we received.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, unfortunately, that's not a nickel or a dime for our programs. So, and so forth. It's, if we had been running at full staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to our budget, we would be, I'm not quite sure what we'd be doing other than running a shortfall. So that's a critical, I would be very interested in what her answer is.
Most of the email conversations have said, because when back at the beginning of my tenure, when we were discussing what the mill amount would have been resulted in versus what property tax was. And the conversation was that the commissioners would only approve what we had requested for property tax. So it's still somewhat confusing in that there have been conversations with mills involved, that no mills, then only property tax. On the plus side, because of probably all of our shortfalls in staffing, where if that is a loss, it's not going to affect this year's line.
We can absorb it.
But I think we'll have to clarify it and then make sure that the commissioners know we've already made effectively a $225,000 cut in our budget.
Let me ask a silly question, which I probably should know the answer to. In our budget request for fiscal year 23, I presume we are not counting on the specific line item from motor vehicle revenue taxes, but were we anticipating the same amount of revenue from the property tax that would have been from the motor vehicle tax in next year's request for revenue?
Our budget request for next year, the 100% of the request is property tax.
and reflects absorbing what we would have gotten this year if we don't get the motor vehicle tax.
Yes, we made no assumption of receiving
Okay.
motor vehicle tax.
Right. Okay.
I have a question, or rather, it's my understanding that last year, the county commission approved our budget as submitted, which says to me that the money was there. I mean.
I'm with Dale
they
on that
approved-
one. I'm with Dale on that one.
We didn't go back for any, redistribution of funds or anything. They said, we're gonna go, which means that it was in the general fund. They approved the entire amount. So the money should be there, irrespective of the motor vehicle funds,
Correct.
which I think disappeared because of the way they changed the mill thing. It would be nice to get somebody to say that. But
Right.
I think
I actually think it's really
There.
not, it's not good policy for us to have an approved budget and then have that change based on somebody saying, we're not going to do this. I mean, that's not,
and I don't think they did that, but I just think they didn't tell us.
They didn't.
Or we didn't get it, which take your pick,
right.
Yes, and neither Stella nor I were here at that
Exactly.
point last year, so I
Right.
don't know what was
But-
actual conversation,
Yeah,
but
I suspect it's there and I suspect it's fine, but we need to figure it out or get a definitive something, yeah.
And we will.
Thank you.
Well, if any of one of us can be helpful in supporting you when you talk with them, we'd be happy to. Are there any other questions on the financial narrative?
I would just say that last month or the last 2 months, there has been a request for a forecast of where we're going to land this year. Stella has spent a lot of time trying to analyze what we have, and that's what is in the financial narrative. So if you have any questions.
Well, first of all, that was enlightening. And it was so good to see it in one
Very
place
helpful.
and at this point in the progress of the fiscal year. So thank you for that effort, Stella. And I hope you find it useful as you go towards the end of the year too, to kind of get your feet on the ground for that. So I have 2 questions. I'm still confused about the programs. The amount of money we have in the programs and the fact that it hasn't been spent yet. And I know we talk about this again and again, but we're coming to year end and I'd like to understand that a little bit further.
So just to clarify, there's a couple of areas when you look at the P&L from QuickBooks, where for whatever reason, the foundation budget got entered into our QuickBooks. So what you see in some areas as the total year budget is actually deceiving because that includes foundation. So where that's really, really evident is with the programs budget. So really the only operating budget that should be showing on the P&L for programs is the volunteer appreciation of 3,000. So staff have definitely been having programs and utilizing the foundation budget, but I don't know where they're at. So this is deceiving. So really the only, under programs, the only operating budget is volunteer appreciation. Now that's stated, I did recently code a couple of items that came out of for programming into the operating budget, even though this year we did not have an operating budget for programs. And so that's a little bit confusing. Those items were actually offset with some grants we received from Wyoming State Library for creative aging program. So when you're looking at the P&L and you see grants that's that income we received. So that offset those couple of items that are showing in the programming budget. And then Joe, I know, is trying to work on what volunteer appreciation this year will look like so that he can thank all of you. We can thank all of you, but most likely that $3,000 is probably not going to be spent to the $3,000. So, so in terms of where we're at though, in terms of programming budget, I would turn that question over to Maggie and Diana because I don't know.
I will, just let me add that it is extra confusing because a lot of the programming was reimbursement to the library. So that's reflected elsewhere in the financials, but doesn't get deducted from programs, which is an accounting nightmare. And then when we switched our funds management and accounting to the county, the foundation has taken back the management and payment of those bills. So actual expenditures on programming is now resting at the foundation, and it's just a QuickBooks nightmare.
Okay.
Because of all the changes.
Way
But you can rest assured that we have been continuing to do a lot of programming, spending a lot of programming funds. It's just reflected in really different places in the financials and the foundation's financials now.
Could I ask, since we have the here, where do we stand with respect to spending that little less than $250,000 of programming funds?
I mean, the last number I have is that we are about 190,000 spent of that $250,000, but my understanding is also that the bulk of the costs are going to be coming out this month. Maggie has been watching over this diligently since January, since we took it back over. So Maggie, I would love for you to also chime in if you'd like to do that.
Well, sure, I guess the only thing, a lot of stuff comes in June, like all the summer reading, which is a big expense for youth, so we won't probably have a really good answer of how much of that gets spent until like June 30th, because I've been prompting the spenders, we're getting toward the end of the fiscal year, and so I think there's some frantic spending going on right now.
Great.
But they've made good progress throughout the year.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And we're happy to, once the fiscal year closes, I'm definitely happy to report to you the outcome of last year's budget in terms of programming for the library. So we'll be happy to bring that to you after that closes.
Okay, great.
Just as a reminder though, too, in the fiscal year 23 budget, though, we have added I think it's about 5,000 in the operating budget for programs. So we will have a small operating budget next year. But again, we won't have the foundation information wrapped into our QuickBooks.
And
If you said you had a second question.
yes, so Kip, in our strategic planning meeting, you talked about our budget for strategic planning. Where is that?
That is foundation funds.
Is that part of programs?
No, it's under directors initiatives.
Under director initiatives? Okay, thank you. That was my second question. Thank you.
Maybe it would not, and I would leave this up to the foundation because I don't want to create a lot of work for somebody, but maybe it would be helpful for the library board to have a biannual report on expenditures, just so it's kind of not a black hole out there until the end of the year. You know, you're sitting here wondering like we have been, and it is confusing. I think this has been the most confusing year. Hopefully we're done with all that. But I think at least twice a year would be more helpful if that's you guys.
Absolutely.
I know it's more work,
No,
but
absolutely not a
you
problem.
know,
They do
Agreed.
generate some of that for the spenders anyway.
yeah,
so
I know
think
they
it's
do. Yeah,
available.
so I was just thinking you could just slide it this way, maybe.
Well, I do want to, I mean, we don't thank staff enough for just how hard it's been and how much they've worked to successfully transition our financials this year. It's just been Herculean effort and actually not central to anyone who's been doing it skill base. So it's just been wonderful. And Stella, I'm going to single you out. I know there are others, but you really have done a phenomenal job at helping all of us make this transition as smooth as possible. So,
Thank
Not
you.
waved the white flag yet, but we did.
no, we're not quite there.
Very close every day. I think. We're Stella and I are eagerly awaiting July 1st.
I second that, what Peter said. We here at my office went through a custody transition, and when you start doing things, you do the same things using a whole new system. I don't know. I spent a lot of days just laying on the floor. So if that's what you guys have been doing to cope, just know that you're not alone. It's a big deal to make these transitions. In the end, hopefully we get to a better place. We did, and I hope you do too. But I know how much work this takes. I really do. So thank you.
Specific to the financial documents,
Yes.
March and April's documents are finally produced in the format that you're used to looking at. I think what we've learned in the transition to the county is that a lot of our QuickBooks there's a lot of over accounting, and we need to clean up QuickBooks, align it now with what the county's accounts are, shift some things around so that our chart of accounts matches the county's. Stella and I have talked about possibly working with Anna from Cumulus Accounting. Maggie recommended her. We're going to investigate having someone who is a QuickBooks pro come in and clean it up for us and work with us. So the goal is for the next fiscal year to have a much cleaner QuickBooks than we have been operating under.
Kip, do you have can you set an expectation as to when that process might be done? Is that a couple of months? Would you like to have the grace of 6 months? I'm trying to understand.
Well, I mean, we need to open FY23 now in
Right.
QuickBooks. So we really need this done before July 1st.
Okay, thank you.
And so, and my understanding is that we have not closed out previous years in QuickBooks before. So I don't know what we've been doing, but accounting has not been the library's greatest skill, apparently. So
Well, I could say from personal experience over the last 1 3/4 years that it's gotten much better as from the day that I started to today. Are there questions on the particulars of the financial documents?
Sean, did you?
No, I was wondering if Stella had something she wanted to add.
I do want to make note of 2 things, just to tack on to the statement why we're going to inquire with Cumulus, is that we did receive word from Teton that they will not be helping us at all anymore. So that's just a clarification there, why we're looking for another, just to help us clean up our QuickBooks. The one thing I wanted to make note of is under interest. As we've moved to the county, we're really accruing a lot more interest on a monthly basis. So that's been a good thing. I think our total interest from the county, I'm sorry, I don't have it.
just under $3,000
Yeah.
so far.
In 4 months. So that's been a positive here.
I want to know where they bank.
They're at Wells Fargo, but I don't know what sort of account or.
Well, we get the advantage of accumulated funds with all the other departments, so I think that's probably.
Ah, exactly.
I do believe we need to approve these financials despite the fact that there's no motion written on the agenda. Is that not correct?
I believe that is correct, and that is my.
It's okay. If there aren't any further questions on the financials, I will take a motion to approve the financials for March and April. 2022. I guess I'll move that motion. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Director's report.
Sure, a couple of things. Hiring seems to be always the topic of discussion. We currently have 3 part-time library assistant vacancies. The recruitment is ongoing. In talking to Stephanie about her recruitment, we're at that point in the year where we tend to get seasonal applicants, and that's probably not a good investment of our time because somebody would leave in a couple of months. So we're being very cautious in our recruitment right now in for those positions. The IT technician position, we have been sharing a position with county IT for about a month, and the person in that role has cited some personal reasons for leaving and will be leaving before the end of June. But we did have an applicant who was a qualified person who they had planned on interviewing. And so that was a successful interview. We're pending reference check, I believe still, but the discussion has been had with county IT, and this person will be positioned at the library full time. So we will have filled our position, and county is, I guess, on their own to find a full-time replacement now for the person who is leaving. And administrative assistant, all lights are green. The candidate or the now employee, I guess, has found housing here and will be starting on Monday. So
Congratulations.
it's only, a 6-month or longer process, but
It's not
we're
Monday
there.
yet, but congratulations, I think.
Exactly.
You absolutely did that on purpose, so I would have to do these minutes one more time. didn't you?
I thought that
I knew
last
you
night.
did.
I thought that
I thought
last
Monday. I'm
All
so
designed
happy,
around
don't
that.
get me wrong, I'm blissfully happy about it.
They're great minutes.
Well,
We
they'll do
appreciate it.
the job, let's put it that way.
The other highlight would be the strategic planning process is well underway. Since our last meeting, the steering committee has conducted several excellent exercises, I think, in doing a SOAR analysis for the library, looking at our strengths and opportunities. We've also drafted a new working mission and vision statement. We've expanded the library's value statement, which is based on the county's values. We've added a couple of library-specific values to those. And then we finally had a meeting with the facilitators who will be leading us through the process. They've sort of just described the process to us, gave us a sketch of timeline that we would want to follow. Grace and I will, or probably Grace. Grace and I will be developing our actual timeline and plan for that based on what the facilitators had said. We do have a community survey that is finally complete after a lot of back and forth and input from all the committee members. That may actually be live today, but we are going to do a lot of publicity around that. We're going to translate it into Spanish. And we discussed yesterday a lot of ideas on how to get the survey out into the community. So that will be happening. And the closing of the survey will be around July 15th. So we'll have about a 6-week window where we'll be really pushing the survey on our communities.
May I just add that
Yep.
Kip, you and your team are just doing an amazing, awesome job. And I am so impressed with the quality of thought that comes out of your meetings.
You're part of the committee too. You're.
But I think you've made really significant strides towards our strategic plan, and I'm very happy. So it's enjoyable on top of it, because it's why I love strategic planning. And I hope everyone else is enjoying the process of thinking about these things. I think there's been a lot of value in just the thought process that's occurred. So thank you.
The other piece from my director's report to just draw your attention to would be, we just conducted a space use study of the library, which we have not done since March of 2020. Like that long ago. It's really hard to compare 2020 to 2022, just we measured things a little differently this time. We singled out the study rooms, which had not been before, so we can't really compare. And also COVID has happened. March 2020 was before spring break, before shoulder season. Our survey this year was during shoulder season, when it's a little quieter. So it was really just a snapshot in time. I think going forward, we'll do them on a regular basis, so we start to measure the same data and can start to see some actual trends. But I think it is worth noting that the actual physical use of the building overall is sort of mirrored in 2022 from what we did in 2020. The peak periods of use tend to be the same time. So people are still using the building the way they were, just not in the numbers that perhaps they were in 2020. The most notable change would be, while there is a uptick in usage in the after school time in the youth wing, the numbers are drastically lower because we don't have after school programming. But I can tell you that the youth services team is hard at work. We will be back to 5 days of after school programming in the fall. We're working with the Literacy Center. We're working with Children's Museum and the Art Association. So there will be some significant changes in the fall again. So we'll have the kids back. But I guess the main point is we're going to start doing these on a regular basis so that we can really start to have some useful data. We hadn't measured what was going on at Alta in 2020, so I can't tell you what Alta was doing before. But anyway, any questions?
Pretty interesting that the first hour, no matter what time you're opening up, is just slow.
Goes with it. I guess what was most striking to me is the fact that the total was about half of what it was in March of 2020. And March of 2020, we'd already started slowing down. The COVID fear was here. And so that number, and I love the quiet, low population in the library when I visit. How selfish can you be? But does that concern you, that that the community is that much less at the library right now, for whatever reason?
I think it is, I don't know if I'm concerned so much, but I think, one, we didn't do this study until right after we had fully
And it was
put
shoulder
all the
season.
furniture out and everything. I think, yes, ultimately, it's a bit concerning that we don't have those same numbers, but we don't have the after-school programming that brings in families. We don't have
Yeah. Okay,
The study rooms tend to be as popular as they were in 2020. But just by anecdotal stories that they're always in use and
Well,
they.
and anecdotally, the 2 Tuesday evening programs that I've gone to are doing both in person and Zoom. And their numbers are equivalent to what they had for in-person pre-COVID, but they have about half of the attendance in person. So it's, in other words, people are staying home and still and using that Zoom option now. So I don't know whether on our programming, to the extent that there's programming like story time and so forth, where there is an online aspect to it, whether that's also indicative of transition out.
A lot of Leah's programs tend to be out of the building, so that the numbers of attendance at her programs is high, but they're not in the building. So, I
Yeah, foreign policy is all Zoom now, isn't it? The foreign policy. Is
it was this
programming
year, and I
was all
suspect
Zoom.
next year will probably be
Yeah.
a hybrid, just because people do like staying home.
well, I think this is a good metric to monitor how programs are succeeding and how the library is becoming more important to the community. So I really like this study. And it'll be a metric that'll give feedback on how successful are we and
Yeah.
doing it regularly sounds smart. So you might just add a bullet in there that says people have moved off site. Just remind us all what you just explained.
Are there any other questions for Kip on his director's report?
I actually have a quick one on digital downloads on Coupa. It says that checkouts were adjusted to 15 a month. Is that up or down?
I believe that is up. I believe
That's what I.
it was either 10 or 12 before.
Okay.
Um,
I
the-
was just curious about that.
it had sort of peaked, the usage had peaked, and so we up the number.
Okay. Thank you.
Diana or Maggie? Foundation report.
Okay. Well, I'm going to, I have the report here. I'd love to share some items with you, but first, I believe Maggie has an announcement that she would like to share with all of you.
I would like to say hello first, and thank you for giving me the floor, Diana. I want to share with you, I've accepted a position with Navigate LLC. It's run by Christine Walker to work on affordable housing projects around the Mountain West. So my last day with the foundation will be June 30th. I'm happy about this because I'm super excited about the opportunity, but sad to not get to work with you all so closely in the future. So I guess I wanted to come, this will be my last board meeting with you in person. So I wanted to come and just thank you for the opportunity. Over the last, I'm in my 5th year to work on behalf of the library. So I think my hope is, down the road that I'll still be working to support the library, but just on different projects. Christine's main local project is the Northern South Park effort that's underway. So hopefully we'll see some housing, perhaps for library workers that will come out of that project. So Diana and I are working on a transition plan. We haven't totally ironed out what the next 6 weeks will look like, but the foundation's in great hands, and thank you all and keep up the great work. So that's my news. Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie.
Maggie.
A pleasure.
Congratulations on your
Thank you.
news. They're lucky to have you.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I bet you are.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a big-
And you're tackling a big issue.
Yeah. Lots to learn. I got some catching up to do.
So as you can imagine, it's bittersweet right now in the foundation office. I've been just so grateful for Maggie and helping to lead me through this transition as we move into having a new executive director. And I was, selfishly, I'm like, no, we're just getting in our groove, Maggie. But I am super excited for her as well because, just witnessing her work on the housing task force, as Kip could probably attest, she's super passionate about that. And so this is going to be a wonderful place for her. So related to the housing task force, I do want to announce that we do have a board member who will be stepping onto the committee. Wendy Martinez is going to be joining us, and she has wonderful experiences, you know, in the community as well with Habitat. And so she intends to be present at our next meeting next Tuesday. So I look forward to seeing how that goes. Now, we also have, thank you so much again for approving the book swap event and serving of alcohol. We are really excited that we have a date firmed up now for June 26th. You should all be receiving your invitations. We have an announcement going out via email today to our database and letting everyone know, all of our guests, that we look forward to seeing everyone on June 26th. And we hope you join us for that event. It'll be a fun time to get in there and use the library spaces we talked about. So we're looking forward to that. And especially I'm looking forward to meeting some new folks from the community that I've not had a chance to meet yet. So again, we encourage you all to come to our book swap event. We have our upcoming committee meetings on June the 1st and our board meeting on June the 8th. Looks like we have a tri-board also with you in between those. So we're preparing our agendas and talking points for our upcoming committee and board meetings right now. And then finally, I just want to share with you that we have formally submitted the library's request to the Foundation for Programming Services and Facilities Enhancements. We've drafted, we did a little bit differently this year in that we drafted a financial narrative as well. And so it's a bit long at 8 pages, but we would love to share it with you if anyone would like us to email this to you. How we approached this year was defining really the who, what, why on all of the budgeted line items to share with the board. You know, maybe not everyone is fully and completely familiar with each and every program in great detail. So we have established for every line item kind of the who, what, why of that programming and why it is important. We've also separated out in the report existing programs and services, and then we've separated out new or fully restored programs, new enhancements, and new collection items. So again, happy to share this with you. And that's been submitted to our finance committee for consideration, and then they'll have a formal discussion on June the 1st. Any questions?
That would be great if you could email it to us. That'd be super.
Okay.
Okay. Kip, I can't see all of the online participants. Do we have somebody from the Friends that's represented?
We do not, we just have the written report, it looks like.
Well, we'll take that as read. How's that? The next item is we are 28 days past our last board meeting, and we have a 30-day process on the amendment to the bylaws. So if we wanted to meet in 2 days, we could do that, but this is going to be continued until the next board meeting. Abigail, do you want to, I mean, are there any issues that the current board members have? And is it clear what has happened?
Have we got any comment?
It's not open for public comment.
It's
but
just,
it's just for the board to
just
consideration.
consideration.
I mean, the public could have. comments
Somebody
if they
could say
wanted
something,
some,
that's,
but-
yeah, which
But
wouldn't
no one
surprise
has.
me, yeah.
No one has.
Nobody has.
I believe the 30 days is more designed to slow the process down, to make sure hasty decisions aren't made, that they're well thought out, you know, in case something occurs to someone. That's the intent of the section in the bylaws that says an amendment can't be adopted until it's been presented and sat in your minds for 30 days.
It's intended for the board members to be reflective and contemplative about whether they really think what they thought.
That is my understanding.
Perfect.
So no, quick reactions to things. And so, yeah, I was working on Saturday on the language for the motion, and I went, and started pulling out the calendar and started to count, because it was 35 days from your March meeting to your April meeting, but only 28 from April to May. 4 weeks.
Well,
So-
thank you for the count. I had to use my fingers and my toes, but yes. So if nobody has an objection, we will just take this up at the next board meeting. Moving forward, the board updates. Dale, Diversity Subcommittee.
Well, our intent today is to do an exercise. I'm not sure, Peter, if you want to do that now, or if you want to have these other reports and then do it.
If you don't mind, I'd rather get through the other reports and then do that at the end of the following of the few reports. I think it's going to be a good exercise, but we'll be pretty quick on these other ones. If you're all right with that. So let me skip that for the time being. Housing Task Force update, please.
Nina. That's you.
Nina, I don't know if that's you or Kip or.
I think Kip's been doing them, but I can happily do it.
I don't know, it says board update, so
Where's Joe when I need him? The committee continues to meet pretty regularly, I would say almost every other weekish. We did a follow-up to our survey, asking a little bit more detailed questions relating to people's interests in types of housing or renting, and if that was county provided or tied to their job at the library, what their interests would be in those types of things, and a better understanding of people's positions or ability to be able to purchase any of those items. So we are parsing through that information. We will miss Maggie and her expertise in following some of these housing topics. They're complicated and lengthy. And so I hope that she will continue to allow us to pick her brain on a regular basis going forward, which I'm sure the answer is yes. So we're sort of working through that type of information, and we're going to start to incorporate some foundation board members as well into the process, given the interest in maybe having the foundation support some of these items. But we have a lot of good information. I really appreciate the staff sort of being willing to participate again in yet another survey. We have been able to eliminate one option in some manner, which was we really looked into stipends and just adding those, and the feeling that we've gotten and just some of the research that we've done, that clearly would need to be a county-wide initiative that the county supported, and not something that the library could do rogue, or as much as I was pushing for that, or supported by the foundation. So sadly, we'll have, we'll have to work in, if people are interested in that, we'll have to figure out another avenue to get stipends or a housing addition to people's salaries. So while that's disappointing, it does help narrow our focus and leads us down a better path and a more direct path. So I think that's it, unless I have two committee members here that could help us.
that covered pretty much everything.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
I forgot you had a cold, so I'm sorry to make you talk.
Oh, no, I actually have my voice today, so that's helpful.
Can I?
Abigail?
I'm gonna step outside my role for just a second. This county might, which and what I'm about to say might get me in trouble with a lot of people. But before I forget, especially since programs like a stipend that you would seek specifically for your library staff, it doesn't seem like it's tenable without it being a county-wide program. And there might be numerous issues. There's the housing apartment preservation program where people can, and there might be other avenues. The last thing I want is one more deed restriction to have to review. Because right now, there's programs when I have to go review the deed restriction templates, there's a lot going on. But I'm just wondering about a deed restriction that could be placed on especially existing housing, but maybe even potentially future housing, that where the deed restriction says the library staff gets first dibs.
So that's kind of what we're heading towards is, how do we want to be involved? Because what I too have connections to people seeing things that are coming down the pike. And, the feeling we all get is there's a lot that's about to come. And so how can the library, if given our our nice and generous support from an outside foundation, can we use that leverage to help us have first dibs on something like what was done for the apartment at Redmond, I forget, Redmond Hall, is that what it's called? In a way that sort of helps us utilize things that are already coming to the benefit of our staff. So we are working on that. And then I did forget one of the other programs that was sort of what we've realized is that just applying for these homes or knowing what's available or trying to figure out some sort of system for helping people navigate the existing system is something else we're working on to help maybe have like a group night where staff can work together to apply, to have someone there who can answer the questions, to make sure their applications are done in full. Because many of these places, you have to pre-apply. And then when the opportunity comes up, sort of jump on it. So we're working on those things since that can be a little bit more immediate than housing that's going to be 2 or 3 years down the road. And the other thing we're trying to figure out is if, I know a lot of nonprofits sort of have a network of individuals that are constantly sort of looking and helping so that, and if an opportunity comes up that is affordable, that sort of could be texted to everyone on a group text or a email chain of people who are interested in opportunities like that to sort of help them be able to navigate those systems. I think one of the things we all know about Jackson is a lot of times housing's about who you know. And so sort of using that ability to leverage that knowledge as well. So those are the items we're working through.
Specifically the preservation program, which is relatively new, where the county uses money to buy deed restrictions on housing stock. And a lot of it happens voluntarily, like, well, at least one has happened where a member of the community who owns a home is willing to sell it. And it gets, a deed restriction gets placed on it for a particular program. But if there was a deed restriction that was said, we're gonna deed restrict this house, but I want library staff to get first dibs, then potentially large donors might own, a condo or something appropriate and might choose to do that. Like, well, I'll sell this, I'll put it in the program in exchange for a certain amount of money and not sell it for fair market, but with a deed restriction, but have the deed restriction be specific for library. It probably need to be, this is assuming that could be doable at all. I don't see why not. It would probably be like library gets first dibs maybe, because you would never want it sitting there empty a lot. So I don't know. If anyone proposes that idea outside of this room, it did not come from me.
Unfortunately, it's been recorded for.
Hey, a random member of the community wondered.
You had your community hat on.
Okay, I'm taking my, okay, I know.
Thank you, Nina. And thank you guys for all the great work that's going on. It sounds like there's actually, we're making progress, slow as it might be, but it's good. The BOCC quarterly report seems to meet more often than quarterly, but we do have a meeting coming up on May 30th. I will, unless anybody objects, I will do my effort at doing a quick summary for them, a written summary, with a lot of help from Kip.
One quick thing here, May 30th is Memorial Day, so
Well, then that it's whatever their voucher meeting is. That was what it was on the calendar for, but it's whatever that voucher meeting is of that week. I assume they're going to do it on the 31st. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
In front of me, I sent it, remember I sent it to you with the sample, but
Yes,
you'd have
I
to go
know.
find it.
Well, in any event, it's coming up in the next quickly. I will send a draft note around to everybody for your comments, and with some help from Kip, if he's willing to do that again. Of course, everybody is willing. I will also let you know when that is in that note, and anyone is obviously, we'd love to have anybody and all there if they want. I will say the last 2 times that we have been physically present, it's been an exercise, in good exercise and meditation and patience, because our 5 minutes took almost an hour and a half before it was allowed to be presented both times, but it's just fine.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Monday's the holiday, and I have in my calendar that there's not a regular commissioner meeting on Tuesday, so the 31st, so I have a feeling that whole week is.
It will probably be the next Monday then. We are hosting the Tri-Board quarterly meeting on June 2nd. And so I will be sending out, and with Kip's help, an invitation to the friends and to the foundation for subjects that they'd like to cover. We have partially, one of the agenda items is we had a 6-month, we have in our first set of documents that we said going into last year, going into the first meeting of this committee last year, that we'd take a sort of a 6-month reflective review of how this is working. We've done that partially. One of the subjects that I would like to address again is how this is working. If the 3 entities are thinking that this is working well, or tweaks to what we're doing. So, and I certainly would like any of our board to comment on matters that they like to bring up as well in this meeting. And remember, it's an informal meeting, just to really make sure that everybody is in sync with what's going on at the various organizations. And that meeting is the 2nd at 4 o'clock, and I'd love to have it in. Well, Kip, I'll leave it up to you as to which room in the library we're going to have.
okay, I think it's already reserved for the Ordway, so.
Perfect.
So how do you want inputs on the relationship on the Tri-Board?
I'm going to circulate an invitation for the agenda, and everybody gets to see that. And I think that's the best place to add or subtract, by sending an email to Kip, and Kip's the coordinator for everybody, I think. Sorry, I'm volunteering you, Kip, but that's the role you've been in.
So I have a question. Who is our county commissioner library focal point now?
That will be changing no matter what, because, well, my understanding is officially it has not changed from Mark Newcomb, but in his absence, Mark Barron has been actively reporting on the library board matters to the BOCC. It is my understanding, although I could be wrong, that Mark is not going to be seeking re-election for the upcoming fiscal year. And so I don't know, and I don't know who their officers are, but to my understanding, Mark Newcomb has not officially been, his position as a liaison is is still extant.
So the reason I asked that question here is there was some thought in the past about asking if the county commissioners wanted anything reported in your report, Peter, in the BOCC report.
Mhm.
And who do you go to ask that question?
I usually send a memo to Natalia and,
Oh,
and as the chair. But as she's out on leave, I'm gonna basically send it to everybody on the BOCC and let everybody, let everybody be able to respond.
Commissioner Probst is the acting chair, I guess. He's the vice chair. So if you want to just send it to one person.
Yeah, and I'll be back tomorrow night, and I'm going to, this is one of my weekend projects to get this, all the organization going. Dale,
Yeah.
how about our exercise?
Okay, do you want to lead this, Peter, or?
No, I think you're doing I think you should do that, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's fine. You and I had not had a chance to talk about it, and
Right.
so I hope everyone did their homework and read the article and watched the short video. And I also sent out the email from Angela, which I thought was very helpful in terms of, they had done this with staff, and I felt this was a good place to start. So perhaps I found there were a couple of really helpful things in her email when she talks about setting boundaries for discussions such as this. And they basically outlined 3 things: prioritize your individual needs, set your own boundaries for sharing, and disagree, but don't be disagreeable. So I felt like that was all good advice. And then there's a series of 3 questions that we're going to ask, that I will ask. But before I do that, I'd like to hear what if the board feels that, how they felt about the literature that was provided in terms of the article and film. Was that in tandem helpful? I mean, this is just a beginning here for us to do this together. So I'd like to, or should we go through the entire exercise maybe and then discuss that? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm not a shy flower on this one, or on most anything. I thought it was very helpful. I think that this is something that you and I have talked about, Dale, in terms of becoming a regular effort to keep training our board in awareness, and that for this initial one, doing it at a board meeting as part of it is a good function, but that probably in the future we would take it on as a standalone session when we have continued training. I thought that 4-minute video exercise was quite a moving and powerful and interesting perspective. I'm more of a visual person than a reading person, and so that's what impressed me. I don't know if we could do a visual. I think it's hard to do it in this session because here I go out of the Zoom picture, but I do think that is an exercise like that in the future would be quite good.
I do too.
I liked the format.
Yeah.
It worked really well for me, being able to read the article in time, having it and think about it. And then also the supporting information. It was just right size.
Good.
And very stimulating. So I think it was
related to these exercises. One of the requests made of the foundation is funding for EDIA training for the staff. And one component of that is also a standalone training for the board. That would be probably held as a special meeting, just so you can sort of do it in without the public, but still the public would be invited, but it does look like a very good training, and I think it would, with 2 new board members possibly coming on board, a training like that would be useful for the board.
So that's in the request.
Yes.
Great.
I think that's really good, and I think it's important, even though I know it's uncomfortable. But I think it's important that there be a public component to this. I think one of the reasons we're in such a mess with this is because so much of it has been hidden or not spoken of or considered disgraceful somehow or uncomfortable, painful. And I think if we're going to change it, we need to change it in public. So that's one reason why I feel that even though we don't have a huge attendance here today, but and probably that will be the case in the future, but I personally don't feel that the public aspect is a bad thing, even though I'm sure I will live to rue those words.
But Dale, part of our strategic planning effort, we've talked about it with staff and with the state, where it's central in our future for the library to be a brave space, a safe space, a place for discourse that is civil. And this ties hand in hand with that, which is to try and break through unspoken, unrealized biases that may exist and really be able to understand and have a perspective that contributes to positive dialogue. And so I think this fits hand in hand with our mission, and also where we are stating explicitly in our very public, what will be very public strategic plan, what the library is standing for. So thank you.
I think you're right on. So you can go first. Round fun, I'm gonna
Hey, I
ask.
thought you were going to go first.
You're gonna go first. I'll ask the first question and then we'll just go around and everybody can make a short response, because I know we have other things to do today too. So the first question is, what are 1 or more ways in which you've had unearned disadvantage in your life?
I was pretty severely bullied from about age 6 to about age 12 in school.
Sean?
I was born into extraordinary poverty in rural Michigan.
Grace?
I was an engineer and a woman trying to succeed in aerospace where there were no women for the most part in that field. It was new ground, and there were a lot of disadvantages to that. And I'm going to also say there were advantages. So,
We'll get to that. I think mine would have been a lot of bullying at work. When I first came to Jackson, I worked in bars quite a bit, and that was a very masculine run business at that time. And there was a lot of bullying of female staff and harassment, which was a learning process. Nina?
Oh, man, I would say, I don't know if I want to share too much, but it was a rough childhood. I had a lot of advantages, but I also had some disadvantages. with my parents.
Okay, and thank everyone for sharing those. The next question is, what are one or more ways in which you've had unearned advantage in your life? You want to start us off, Peter?
My parents could and encouraged me to go to whatever college or university I wanted to and could afford to do that.
Sean?
I would say that appearing, being male and being white, opened doors to kind of move out of the socioeconomic situation my mother and I were in when I was small, so.
I'm going to take the flip side of the coin, being a woman engineer in aerospace early in that process, and say that there was an impetus to correct that. And it was being addressed, just like we're talking about today. How do we address it? And so I had the unearned advantage of having mentorship and supporters who helped me deal with a lot of it. So I thought that was unearned, fortuitous, that I happened to be there at the right time.
And I'm going to refer to the article. In this article, which we did put this online, and I'd encourage anybody to read it. This woman who writes this about the effects of white privilege gives a long list of differences. I think there are 26 things in her list about how she can do certain things that she knows other people can't. And I can say that I can do almost all of these, not all of them. As a woman, there are some that don't apply. But I can do almost all of this without even thinking about it, which I think is horrifying, but true. Nina?
Oh, I agree. I mean, I was born white, affluent. I got to go to private schools. My college was paid for. So I had no debt coming out of college. And while I did not get to go to the college that I wanted to, I was able to leverage those. And then my private school gave me connections in my hometown that were a significant advantage.
And then the next question is, what is it like for you to sit here and talk about and hear about these experiences of unearned advantage and disadvantage?
I can do that in almost one word: refreshing. It's the older I get, the less tolerance I guess I have for beating around the bush on what are uncomfortable and needed conversations that are meaningful and real about where I am as an individual, and how I can be a better part of, sounds trite, but be a better part of humanity by understanding where I really fall short and how I have the opportunity to improve, to try and continue to affect positively the people around me.
And I think we could just generally discuss this. And I'd also like to add the follow-up question, because I think they go together so well. And it's it says that Angela sent in her email. It says, why do we think many people in the US, us obviously, especially white people, have trouble seeing systemically? At least in part, it's tied to the myth of mediocrity, that the unit of society is the individual, that whatever one ends up with must be whatever that individual wanted, worked for, earned, and deserved. Why do you think this myth survives so successfully, suppressing knowledge of systemic oppression and especially of its upside, systemic privilege? And I feel sure we've all been exposed to the stiff upper lip syndrome that, you know, you just do it, and the people that for some reason didn't do it the way you did it are less rather than different. And I think that's a very hard thing to deal with. And we obviously are all white people, so we have a perspective that's, you know, been a cultural advantage that I'm sure we perpetuated in ways that we're not even aware of, which is the scary part about, one of the scary parts.
I mean, I think I have, if anyone really knows me, I think they know I have real problems with the amount of screen and entertainment options in the world right now. But one of the things I would say about it is that it allows us to participate in culture and in ways that we have been sort of sheltered from in the past. And I think one of my big, I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but the revelation of how much other cultures have had to participate in white culture, and the ability for me to not have to participate in other cultures or understandings in even the smallest of ways, from literature to TV shows to you know, any part of it, I think has been a real, you know, sort of public good of the ability to have more than just 3 television channels for all of us. You know, I mean, I think it's clear we all want to believe that we're special and amazing. So it's not shocking to me that we continue to believe the individual is more powerful than the system. But that is very clear to me that the system is very powerful and directional.
I sort of thought about it as, now that I've been made more aware and that this has really brought it into my mind, and in particular, the things that stick in my mind are systemically, and the concept of meritocracy, which I've been thinking about in the shower, and I've been thinking about it a lot since this came up. But I think having this awareness will create an ability to maybe better recognize that when I see it, I'll know it. That it's hard to put our arms around it right now in a single event. But as I started thinking about it, I thought about our VITA program, and did we do things that were systemically creating disadvantages. And so I think it's something that's just ongoing, and that this creates that opportunity to have it in your mind. And also gives me some words to think about it. Meritocracy, systemic, I like that, just to keep focused on those things.
Well, maybe we can, I think we're, you know, now that we've talked about it a little bit, I've realized we're more gifted than a lot of people in the fact that this is a pretty safe place to talk about it. As uncomfortable as it may be, it's still a pretty darn safe place. So I think that's a plus. I do think it's important to like Peter spoke, to keep it in front of us all the time in our strategic planning, and Nina had pointed out some things in our building that we hadn't even done, which it contributed to people not having as much access, which, you know, I'm ashamed to say I hadn't thought of all of them. So I think Grace is right, every little bit will help. And perhaps for the next time we could, I can get a copy of that exercise for us, and we can do it in terms of the visual one, because I do think that's a very powerful thing in terms of, you know, where people in the room wound up, and perhaps we can do it together. We could invite anybody who's here to do it with us that day. But does anyone want to add anything about how we're doing it, or what we should do, or how you feel about it? I mean, let's just open it up.
Well, I was wondering, I really enjoyed that video. I think it's a good physical representation of some hidden advantages, or maybe not recognized advantages, less hidden. I wonder, you know, as someone who sees communities sort of disappearing a little bit, I wonder if there's interest in reaching out to other boards and creating that, doing that exercise, not in a vacuum, but with other people or community, you know, in the parking lot of the library or something one Tuesday night. And I don't want to put that on staff, but more put that on us to reach out to possibly the foundation board, or maybe the literacy center, you know, Children's Museum, Art Association, any of these groups that we've worked with, or the library has partnered with in the past, and see if there's interest in sort of doing something collectively. You know, I find it interesting to do these things with you, and I would love to encourage that. I also would, maybe there's some leverage here that we could encourage the community to participate together and be more powerful in that.
And I know DEI also is interested in doing more community things. I think they, like everyone, is handicapped by not having enough people to help, but I think that's a really good idea. I think we should go forward with it too, just because you know, I think it's every little bit helps, so to speak, but I think that's a great idea. And Peter, you and I can maybe reach out and see if we can.
I think that's a great idea. And I think that, I think there are two aspects to it. One is, I think that this should be part of at least a couple of times a year for our board institutionally to go through exercises such as this. I also think, again, in the spirit of the library being a hub of connection in the community, getting other organizations to join us in, again, I thought that 4-minute video for 4 minutes was really powerful. So I think Nina's idea is great. And I think if we can get something like that going too, that also is central to our mission. And so I think there are two aspects to it. So let's do it, Dale. Let's you and I put our heads together when I get back into town.
Okay, sounds good. And I'd like to thank everybody for participating. And if we're good.
Well, thank you.
Input, yeah, I think we can move on, Peter.
All right, well, thank you all for doing that. I know it's not easy, and I'm, you know what, this board has come a long way in 2 years, and I just, it's wonderful to have this kind of ability to do this. Now to the, sorry, Sean, it's now to the, well, there matters from, are there any other matters from board members, library staff, or supporting organizations? Hearing none. Sean, it's a little, oh, go ahead, Stella, sorry.
I was gonna say, Amy's hand is raised in the.
Okay.
I don't know. if-
Super.
That's just the cursor.
Oh, okay, sorry. My apologies.
So Sean, we're off to you for the payment of library vouchers.
I have reviewed them and would move to approve the payment of the library vouchers.
I will second that motion. Does anybody have any discussion? If none, I'll take it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We are going to go into an executive session to discuss the Kip's performance. It's part of our normal quarterly performance review. I would move to go into executive session to discuss a personal matter in accordance with Wyoming statute 164405. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Kip, can
FYI.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I should not be-
Yeah, but you've had this discussion, you recorded it.
All right, so we have come out of executive session.
Okay,
And no action was taken.
right. Oh, yeah, and I always put that in there too.
And so I would take a motion now to adjourn our board meeting.
I'll so move.
Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor? Any discussion, excuse me? All in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.